Greetings fellow ukuleleans, Jeff Weinberger coming at you here with a new ukulele tutorial. Continuing our series on essential chord progressions. Today I'd like to talk about the 12-bar blues. It's a fairly easy progression to get a grasp on, but there's so many varieties of blues and such a big genre of music that you can't really talk about one type of blues or another. You gotta kind of address all the different types of blues. What I was just playing there, that was Smokestack Lightning, and that was a great Howlin' Wolf song. And that's kind of exemplary of the Chicago blues style. 1960s Chicago blues that used electric guitars and harmonica through distorted microphones and amplifiers, and just a great sound, real stomping drums and real steady bass. It was a style that really caught on, and that kind of formed our modern impression of blues today. But even before that, there were blues, you know, way back at the turn of the century, 1800s going into the 1900s, played on piano, known as boogie woogie and stride and all of that. So there was blues back then. They just maybe didn't call it blues. They might not have had the word yet, blues. They had other names for it. And then as it evolved, you know, you had country blues, you had acoustic blues, like you might hear Mississippi John Hurt play, or Elizabeth Cotton and folks like that. Piedmont blues, you know, that was particular to the southern southeast, the southern Atlantic coast of the United States, Piedmont blues. You have Mississippi Hill Country blues, which is a whole nother little subgenre. Up in the north of Mississippi, you had great artists like R.L. Burnside and Junior Kimbrough, T. Model Ford. They were all on this Fat Possum Records label, so you can check out. I'll try to leave some links below to so you can do a little research and see some of these people for yourselves. But that opening thing I played, that was Howlin' Wolf. That was in the key of D. And that's a real typical, not only Chicago blues, but a riff-based blues, where they just play this one riff over and over for the whole song, rather than get into chord changes. But let's talk about a standard 12-bar blues, and then I'm going to do a part 2 of this video where we get into variations of the standard blues, and also possibly minor key blues, because there are some really good blues songs in minor keys too. I'm sure you know The Thrill Is Gone by B.B. King. That's one of the most famous. But anyway, let's get ourselves into the key of C here, just for our music theory talk. So in a 12-bar blues in C, a great thing to use for your 1 chord is a C7. That's the chord of choice. C would work too, but C7 just has a little bit of a bluesier tang to it, so I like to use C7, or alternating between C7 and C. That creates a nice little riff all by itself. But even if you just sat on C7, that would work for us. Alright, so the simplest form of blues, where you have the least number of chord changes, would be that C7 chord for 4 measures. 4 counts of 4. And then for the next 2 measures, you would switch to an F or an F7 chord. In case you don't know F7, here's a fairly easy one. 2, 3, 1, 0. And then if you're up for it, add your pinky and do 2, 3, 1, 3. Has a little bit of a brighter sound. So either one is good, either F7. If you can't do F7 at all, just do F. F would work. So you do that for 2 bars, then you return to C7 for 2 bars. And then the final 4 bars are where the quick change happens. You go like this: G7 for 1 measure, F7 for 1 measure, C7 for 1 measure, and G7 for 1 measure. Although you could do it even simpler than that. Some blues songs would just have G7 for 2 measures and C7 for 2 measures for the last 4 bars. So you can reduce it down to as few chord changes as you want. And like I said, some blues songs don't even have any chord changes. They're just a riff over and over, like a lot of Howlin' Wolf songs. Some John Lee Hooker songs too go like that, where they don't have actual chord changes. Alright, so let's practice that together so we get used to it. I'll call out the chords as we go. You ready? 1, 2, 1, 2, C7. Now we're going to F7. Back to C7. Here comes G7, F7, C7, and back to G7. Let's do another round. C, 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 C. Here comes F, F, F. Here comes G, C, excuse me. C. Here comes G, G, and F, C, back to G. One last time. That was kind of a typical 12-bar blues in the key of C. Oftentimes at the end of a 12-bar blues, the last two bars, the bars 11 and 12, you might have a turnaround. You might have a, like you hear Robert Johnson play, Delta blues. That's a whole nother genre of blues called Delta blues from way down south in Mississippi. And that was generally played on acoustic guitars and sometimes slide guitar. But Robert Johnson had that little turnaround in a lot of his songs. And that's kind of a staple of blues too. I have separate videos on turnaround, so I won't belabor the point in this one, but just know that there's a lot of turnarounds to learn to fill in that last two bars. If you don't want to do all of that, if you're not comfortable with doing single note playing and you want to stick to easy chords and strums, then there you would just do the chords that go with that, which would be G7, F7, back to C7, and then G7. You don't have to do any of that turnaround type stuff if you don't want to, but if you're up for it, I have lots of turnarounds that you can grab in one of my other videos. I'll try to remember to leave a link down below for that too, so you can access my video on blues turnarounds in the key of C. Alright, so what do we have so far? We have a 12-bar blues in C. We learned that 7th chords are the way to go, these dominant 7th chords, not minor 7, not major 7, not diminished 7, not augmented 7, none of that, just dominant 7. That's what a C7 chord actually is a C dominant 7th chord. We'll get into that theory at some point in the future, but let's just learn the chords for today. And then when you go to F7, that's also a dominant 7th chord. So dominant 7th chords have that bluesy sound. That's why sometimes major chords don't cut it. For a more simple kind of a country blues or a gospel blues, you might get away with just major chords, just a plain old C chord, a plain old F chord, and a plain old G chord. Those are fine for certain types of blues, especially more like church-oriented gospel and spiritual music that isn't exactly blues. It's not something you would play in a bar or a smoky club or something. It's more of a, you know, devotional kind of tune. Those take to those nice bright major chords more, but for the kind of music we're talking about, kind of the more hardcore blues, 7th chords are the way to go. And then we'll even maybe in the future get into 9th chords and 13th chords and a million things you can do to blues to make it, fancy it up, make it more sophisticated. But we're talking about just simple 12-bar blues today. So that's a great chord progression to know about. Here's what the chords would be labeled. We'd call C7 the 1 chord. We'd call F7, as you can imagine from our finger method, C, D, E, F. F is the 4 chord. And what is G7? It's the C, D, E, F, G, the 5 chord. So in blues, you're generally only dealing with the 1, 4, and 5 chords. And that's why you hear so many people talk about 3-chord songs or 1, 4, 5 songs. You know, there's even groups out there that call themselves the 1, 4, 5 club or the 1, 4, 5 trio or something like that, because they play a lot of songs that just use the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord. It's a very common feature in blues. But there's lots of other things you can do once you master this. So let's take this out by doing our blues in C7 with only 3 chords, and let's see how we do. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, fellow ukuleleans, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you like the blues and want to explore it more. We'll have a part 2 to this and get even deeper into it next time. As always, be sure to subscribe, be sure to like, be sure to click the notify bell to be notified of new videos. When I come out with them, you'll be the first to know. I'll leave all relevant links to whatever we need to learn this stuff down below so that you can get to it. And as always, visit my Patreon page if there's any additional material that we need for these lessons. You can always access it on my Patreon page, which I will definitely link to below. And I do appreciate each and every one of my subscribers here on YouTube and each and every one of my patrons who help me make these videos. You make this possible. Alright, ukuleleans, you take care. Bye-bye.